In this episode, I have an interview with Jim Marx. He's a retired volunteer with No More Deaths, and we discuss the No More Deaths program and also just finding purpose in retirement. This is All-in-One Financial with Bill Holliday. I discuss financial planning issues, investing, taxes, estate planning, insurance, retirement planning. Brought to you by AIO Financial, a fee-only financial planning firm working with clients all over the U.S. and expats all over the world at AIOfinancial.com. All right, thank you for joining me on this episode. I'm glad to present this interview I had with Jim Marx. I am a volunteer as well with No More Deaths, and I appreciated the opportunity to kind of share or ask about the work that they're doing. So, Jim, thanks for joining me. And
you're welcome.
Why don't we start with some background? So, where are you originally from?
Bill, I'm originally from a little town in Minnesota, St. Michael, Minnesota, 30 miles north of Minneapolis, between St. Cloud and Minneapolis. Jokingly, I say Lake Wobegon, if you remember those days. Yeah. I left that community when I was about 19, went off to school, and then lived in various parts of the country. Yeah, that's where I was from originally. Grew up on a farm.
And how did you end up in Tucson? What was the connection here?
So the route was kind of, from here to there. I mean, so I ended up going to school in the St. Louis area, and then part of that schooling was, so I went into a seminary program after my first year of college, and I ended up in the St. Louis area, and from there down to Pass Christian, Mississippi, right during the civil rights era in the 60s. And then after a couple of years of the study of philosophy, went over to San Antonio, Texas. And it was there in 1967, 68, I left the seminary and ended up in Chicago and started teaching at a high school up in Chicago, and then a suburban school. And then I ended up taking an administrator's position in Omaha, Nebraska, and was there 30 years. I stayed 4 years and graduated as a high school administrator. And then I got into what would be the mental health field. I became a therapist, a marriage family therapist, and did that for 25 years. And then when I retired in 2007, my wife always wanted to live in the desert, and her sister lived in Tucson. So we visited her a number of times. So that's how we liked the area. We saw it a number of times. And so I said I could live anywhere. And so we moved here in 2007.
Oh, great. So you've been here for a while.
Since '07, that's right. Yep. This is going on our 13th year. Yeah.
Nice. And so actually going to the No More Deaths project that we both volunteer with, how long have you been connected with No More Deaths?
So we were here 6 months, Bill, and discovered, that something was going on the border that we hadn't been aware of, living in the heartland, as it were. When I was a high school administrator there, we had quite a few students who were from South Omaha, which was essentially the Mexican community. And then when I was a therapist in Omaha, I worked at a shelter there, which we had mostly young Mexican men come up and work in the meatpacking industry. So I was aware, certainly, of the migration. But when we moved to Tucson, I had no idea about the number of deaths that were occurring on the border. And so we had a neighbor that we moved here at the same time with, who was going to No More Deaths meetings. And he invited us to, come to a meeting with him. And it was from that experience that I became aware, and my wife and I became aware of No More Deaths and Samaritans and Humane Borders and a lot of the border justice groups. Yep.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like through your career or life, you've done a lot of service work with seminary and the shelter and high school even. So this doesn't sound like a big step to be doing a lot of volunteering.
For reasons I can't explain, other than I grew up in a family, German Catholic farm family up in Minnesota. But I have 9 siblings besides myself. We were a large family. And but my parents, God love them, while they didn't have a lot of formal education, they really they really believed in looking out for our neighbors, and they really believed in sort of giving back. I mean, that was just something instilled in all of us. So that just translated for me into mostly working in the service fields, education and mental health. Yeah, and so when I retired, I didn't see myself playing golf or doing a lot of things people dream of doing, Bill. I really didn't know what I was going to do, actually. When I became familiar with No More Deaths and what was going on, I jumped into it with both feet. Actually, there was an experience that we had, that Maureen and I both had. First of all, from the meeting at No More Deaths, we ended up training with Samaritans. They do it once a month, and we missed the cycle of training with No More Deaths. So we trained with Samaritans, and it was Ed McCullough, who has been a long-time Samaritan, Tucson Samaritan, who invited us to go to the desert with him to just be out there and do a little exploring and learning some GPSing. And on our very first trip out, we were about 2.5, 3 miles west of the little town of Arivaca, which is about 12 miles north of the border. And darn if we didn't find somebody in the ditch. And Ed turns the truck around, and I'm on the passenger side, and this fella gets up out of the ditch, and he goes, "Awa, awa," and collapses. And my wife was in there. We get out of the truck, and she does a quick assessment and realizes this fellow is in real trouble. Somebody in his probably mid-40s, and he spoke a little bit of English, and we spoke very poor Spanish. What we learned was that he actually was from Sacramento, California, and had migrated back and forth for quite a few years, married an American woman, had American kids, and had lived in Sacramento probably for 20, 25 years. But as the border became tougher to cross in 2001, he now had to hire a guide, to take him across. That guide left him. He didn't wake him up, and he was out there wandering around for like 2-3 days without food and water. And so he was complaining about chest pains, and we ended up calling the Arivaca squad. Of course, that tied him into Border Patrol. They came out. And again, Maureen, was supposed to hand him off to somebody who had a higher level of medical training than she did. We learned very quickly that he probably didn't get the medical help he needed, although we don't know that for a fact, but we've learned from lots of experience that that's what happens. But Bill, that experience was so, I wouldn't say traumatic so much as I was deeply affected by this experience of somebody in the ditch. Bienvenidos, welcome to America. And in Omaha, Nebraska, wherever I live, that was not something that was in my daily fare. And I got into it when the squad picked him up. I got back into the truck and actually was in tears. I was beside myself, actually. Couldn't believe what I experienced. Because a lot of the training up till then and what we heard was, just pretty much academic. But when you actually experience it, as you did in the early days as well, it doesn't feel real. I mean, when I heard the story that, up to, what is it now, up to 7,000 people have died crossing the desert, and that's just known human remains recovered. People say take that times 10. It was my first really major awareness that something awful was happening in our beautiful desert. It was Martin Luther King who said, you can either be angry for the rest of your life, or you can take that angry energy and turn it into something constructive. And fortunately, that's what we did. It was really at that point that I know I made a very conscious commitment, and so did my wife, to, become, seriously involved in the work.
That's great. Could you just describe a little, just basically, what does No More Deaths do?
So the mission of No More Deaths is to end death and suffering on the Mexico-USA border. That's its mission, very general mission. And when No More Deaths started, as you may recall, because I think you were involved in setting up the first camp, if I'm not mistaken, the first thing that No More Deaths did was desert aid work. In other words, to walk the trails, to put water out. So that continues to this day. In fact, the camp that you helped establish is still there. There have now been mobile camps set up. We also now do a lot of work in the West Desert, which is the Cabeza Prieta Wildlife Refuge and Organ Pipe National Monument, because last year, over 30% of the deaths occurred in that region, in the Ajo region. The bombing range is also over there. So desert aid is very important. Very quickly, because so many people then got deported, No More Deaths started working in Nogales, deportees, and almost immediately, besides providing humanitarian aid, we began to do what we call abuse documentation, because we began to hear stories of people who said how badly they were treated in short-term custody. And so abuse documentation then put out a major report about that. One of the big areas right now is Keep Tucson Together, which is our free legal clinic. And that's been going since 2012. In fact, if you read the newspaper, there was an article in the paper this morning that said 2 immigrants held in Eloy Center test positive for virus after release. And so there's been a huge effort on the part of this free legal clinic, Keep Tucson Together, to try to get people bonded out of detention, because it's a petri dish for disease. So far, they bonded out 9 people in the last, I think, month and a half or 2 months. It's very expensive. The bonds are very expensive. The other areas that No More Deaths has developed since then have been search and rescue, for instance. The 24-hour missing migrant hotline, where in a short period of time, they just get unbelievable number of calls with families looking for their loved ones. David Hill, for instance, also has a program where he goes and gets what they call the pertenencias, the belongings that are left behind. Many people don't know that a lot of people do not get their belongings back. And then the Northern Mexico Project, which you and I have lately been involved in, tries to work with some of the leaders in the shelters in Altar, Sonora, Mexico, Caborca. The Ajo Samaritans, along with No More Deaths volunteers, work in Sonorita. It's in the Ajo, in the Lukeville area there. And then weekly, or up until the COVID-19 virus closed the border, we have had people, No More Deaths volunteers, and people helping people from the Aravaca area go down to Sasabe with supplies, yes, and medical attention, medical supplies, and so on. So there's a lot going on, and it's like an Ocotillo. I mean, there's branches all over the place.
Yeah, quite a few projects going on there. How have you seen it develop over time? I mean, I even remember it used to be migrants from southern Mexico. I know now it seems to be more Central America. I mean, how has the border situation and even No More Deaths changed over the time you've been involved?
Well, first of all, it's gotten much bigger. I mean, it used to be just Desert Aid and Nogales. And so some of these working groups that I just described, have developed or come into existence. Like Keep Tucson Together, I think, started in 2012. And that was a result of that horrible bill out of the Arizona legislature, 1070. Made it very difficult for migrants to, cross and be, they had local police, helping them out and so on. I mean, helping out ICE and helping out Border Patrol. So the growth of this organization has been one thing that I've observed. As I've gotten older, Bill, so if I started in 2008, that's almost, it's over 10 years, 12 years ago. I used to be in the desert quite a bit. And for me, that has changed because I got a knee issue and I, just simply don't tolerate the heat as much anymore. So we attract a lot of young people from across the country. I'm just amazed really at the dedication and the passion with which so many of these young people, we have a volunteer program, that's been consistent over time. One of the big changes that's occurred is that we now do what we call month-long programs, inviting people who speak Spanish, who have medical skills, who are able to withstand the heat of the desert. And so they will go out to camp, they'll go to Ajo and, just basically live in those areas so that they can get out and put water out, provide medical aid and so on. And then the Northern Mexico projects, I've been doing that for 6 years, going to Altar once a month with David Hill and then other volunteers, some of the Green Valley Samaritans, Tucson Samaritans, and other No More Deaths volunteers. But that's grown. When the Ajo Samaritans, I think, began to cross at Lukeville and discover all of the Central Americans that are crossing in that region, we began to dedicate quite a large sum of money to help them get food but working with the leaders of those local shelters and the local areas. We try not to go in and be sort of the white savior kind. We don't try not to do that. This is really about aligning with the leadership of the migrants themselves. And it's, in other words, we're not saving them. We're providing food and water and medical attention so that they don't die. We very much want to see the policy that the Border Patrol has established and our own government has established, this prevention through deterrence, it's what it's called. We'd very much like to see that changed because that policy has led to so many deaths. I mean, originally the idea was that we're going to use the desert as a weapon. And that was the idea of the original plan, was nobody would cross this horrible desert and all these mountains, when in fact just the opposite happened. And that policy is still in existence. Now we got this wall. I see the wall as an absolute instrument of torture. I mean, it makes no sense to me that we would be spending billions of dollars setting up a wall that's now making it even more torturous for people to cross. And there was another article in the paper this morning about migrant-heavy meatpacking industry hit by concerns over worker shortages. 60% of all the meatpacking people are immigrants, migrants.
Sure.
It's just amazing how we want their labor, and yet we make it so impossible for them to cross, with any dignity. It's a bit of a mess, as I think you and I would agree.
Yeah, well, that's great that there's a lot of volunteers interested too, because I'm like you, I didn't really realize the magnitude of the situation until I moved here. That's great that there's an awareness of volunteers from other parts of the country to come see it for themselves and try to help out.
Yeah, what they do is when they go back to their respective homes, colleges, wherever they're from, they take it back with them. I mean, I've maintained for years. I've done a lot of, as many have. I've done some talks to groups who will come down and they'll want to know. We'll take them out on trails or whatever. We don't do much preaching, Bill. We don't say a whole lot about, what they should believe or what they shouldn't. We just simply say, just look at the geography and just imagine yourself walking this geography at night with shoes that are not like your shoes or my shoes. Just imagine. And first of all, you hear the government say, well, it's all about the bad guys. We got to keep the bad guys out. 99% of anybody I ever run into are people trying to escape poverty, violence, trying for an economic opportunity to, feed their families. I mean, that's just the reality. And, politicians who say otherwise haven't been here and they simply don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. What are some of the biggest issues? I guess you've covered a lot of these that No More Deaths is focusing on right now. I mean, it sounds like the detention centers with the COVID is a big one. I guess it sounds like there's quite a few issues. They're really not focused on one, but trying to maintain a lot of these pieces at the same time.
Well, that's right. So we've had a large focus on bonds. Trying KTT has been the leadership there, the legal clinic, especially with COVID. There's been a huge effort. We had a GoFundMe effort where we raised over $40,000 in less than a month to try to get money raised to get the bond people out. In fact, one of the things when I was brand new at this, I raised my hand, just to learn as much about No More Deaths as I could, and then I ended up on the fundraising working group and the finance working group, and I don't regret any of that. But for instance, we're in the process of putting a newsletter out, which we do a couple times a year. But all of that is devoted to trying to raise money. In this case, Bill, we have No More Deaths has grown. When I first started, we had a budget of about, I'd say $100,000, maybe less. Our budget now is over $1 million. I mean, wow. So that's buying, used vehicles to be in the desert. That's the water. Last year we put out over 15,000 gallons of water in the desert. Medical. I mean, it's utterly amazing. And we've had to hire people. We now, where we went from all volunteers to where we now had to hire some staff just to maintain some of the things that volunteers can't do. So back to the bonds is a big one. We had the trial last year of our 8 people who were cited, and then Scott Warren, who was charged with a felony charge for harboring and conspiracy to smuggle. And that story well enough, but that's so fresh in our imagination right now. But we spent so much energy, to win that trial. And the good news is that even though the government then went and retried Scott, the jury found him not guilty on all charges. In other words, humanitarian aid is never a crime, and we really had that so overwhelmingly supported. And so, but we still worry because managers out there at Organ Pipe and in Cabeza Prieta still have not given us permission to drive the administrative roads. They still make it difficult for us to do our work, so we can still get arrested for stuff. And so we face that. And of course, you and I both know that with this current administration, where there is this disdain and absolute disdain for migrants. They make it very, very difficult. I mean, legally, the legal clinic, this free KTT has told us, that asylum seekers, for instance, now are stuck at the border. So that's a focus of Number That's work, trying to help them get to their court appointments. We help them buy bus tickets if they need medical attention. We try to do that. Yeah, so it's work on all fronts. I mean, it's I don't know if we could say that there's any one area right now that stands out. It just seems like it's like just the other day, a bunch of our people went out and did a search and rescue, looking, or search and recovery, as it were. And so there's just all these areas that we try to work in.
I mean, there's so many areas. It's become such a big organization. You can't drop these other priorities to focus on any one thing. You got to keep them all going. I know you traveled to Mexico with monthly donations. How do you feel traveling in Mexico? Any issues or problems and, carrying donations down there, or is that pretty smooth for you?
So I've been doing it for 6 years, and I think David started it with someone else. So maybe that's now 7 years that we've been doing it. I have never felt unsafe, Bill. We hear stories, and by that I mean, we hear stories about people who get stopped or this and that. We have always, even when I got stopped at the red light, crossing the border where they can search the car with my supplies, I say in my broken Spanish, por los migrantes in Altar, Sonora, Casa de Migrantes, and whoever's looking at it, go, oh, okay. So, yeah. Now, with COVID is starting in March. The last trip I made was in March, so we had to cancel April, and now we've canceled May because Mexico, I think, has still not reached its peak. Or at least we don't want to carry. I don't want to be, so we're being really careful. I mean, I'm an old guy, so I've got to be probably more careful.
Sure.
And we're trying to respect, but the kind of supplies that we carry, Bill, are things that they request. The shelter in Altar, which is run by the Catholic Church there, but it's staffed by a religious order. And then there's a couple of paid volunteers, I think. They tell us beans and rice, and they're always wanting jeans and shoes and socks, medical supplies, canned goods. I mean, so, usually I fill up my old Honda Odyssey, as much as I can get in. And they're always grateful. I mean, it adds to all. I mean, they've got other donors, that help them, with their supplies as well. We don't go to Caborca, but we ask Altar to share some things with them. But Caborca now, I believe, has rented a building, and I think you know more about that than I do. But I know we just sent them. We put them in our budget, and we are sending them some money each month to help them get established, because the railroad runs through Caborca, and there's a huge number of people, mostly Central Americans, that are getting off and needing meals. I mean, it's astonishing when I think about the numbers, and you've seen them, I think, haven't you?
Yeah.
I was there
No,
maybe a year and a half ago. But the other thing we carry, Bill, this is what we call a harm reduction kit. And inside of it is aqua tabs. So when migrants run into bad water and drink it and get sick, this aqua tabs purifies the water. The comb helps them get cactus out of their skin. There's Band-Aid ointment in here. And then the Green Valley Samaritans made a purchase. They had a grant. But this is called the Life Straw. And this is a kind of an expensive little thing, but when the Green Valley Samaritans go with us, they always want us to take some life straws and give them to Cayman, to the shelter there. So those efforts, in fact, this kit, what we call harm reduction kit, is something that we've asked many groups to contribute to by either volunteering to put them together or help us buy stuff. This kit itself is like $1 worth of stuff, But if you put a lot of them together, of course, here we go. That's why we've got this large budget, you see.
Oh, I was just going to ask, the Life Straw, is that just a filter, like a water filter?
So the Life Straw, it's a filter, And what they do is they put it into the water itself, and there's directions in Spanish on it, and then they suck the water through the filter. You see, these are popular for campers, and so are aqua tabs. But yeah, and the thing is that supposedly you can get 250, drinks out of there. So it's the problem with this live straw in the West Desert is there's no water. And so that's
Right.
more useful. This area closer to Tucson here, this Catalina National Forest area, and in the Altar Valley. Yeah.
So they're saying it seems like a bunch of ways people could get involved and help. I guess, could you just run through? Of course, you can use donations. People can come volunteer for a period of time. People could supply packets or with
Mhm.
their group do packets. Any other support or anything
Yeah.
else you're looking for?
Well, what I would tell people is, first of all, whenever we go out and table, what we call tabling at public events, we'll hand out a brochure, the No More Deaths brochure. And inside this brochure is a listing of all of the working groups. And what I tell people is, in this day and age, you can get the same information on the website. So the website is nomoredeaths.org. Very simple,
Right.
nomoredeaths.org. And I should tell you that the fiscal sponsor, by the way, for No More Deaths is the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson. In 2008, they became our fiscal sponsor. And so we are able to use their 501c3. And so people can donate money to No More Deaths and get a tax write-off. And that's important for a lot of people. But I say that because we've been asked that question many times.
Yeah,
The other
that's
thing in the
good to know.
brochure is a listing. Then there's just material, besides financial donations, we're looking for things like gently used sneakers, hiking boots, athletic socks, men's jeans, shirts, jackets, backpacks, ace bandages, blister care, foot care supplies, other medical supplies, canned food, energy bars, and Gatorade. Lots of this canned good stuff is best picked up here. So we tell people to make a financial donation, but we get any number of boxes sent to us with clothes or socks. And the reason it's important to mention these specifics is because sometimes people clean out their closets and just send stuff we can't use. The other thing that's important is, yeah, the other thing that's important is these are mostly Central American men and some women, but mostly men. And their shoe size is anywhere from 7, 6, 7 to 9. Their underwear size
Sure.
is small. Like I was over at Ross's Dress for Less yesterday, trying to buy small underwear. In this country, you go to a secondhand store and everything's large or extra large. Same
Yeah.
with jeans, small to medium, large, extra large are not useful to us. So it's, for people who are inclined to want to get involved that way, I would just say, just remember who we're, working with. But lots of times, Bill, people just simply, want to get their checkbooks out or their credit cards, and so numberdeaths.org has a funding area where giving online is really easy. That's what so many people are doing today. We're also very much aware that with COVID-19 and people losing jobs or really pinching that now, we understand, that any donation made is really, really appreciated. But we certainly understand that they'll be able to do that at this time. But certainly the other thing they can do is hold a good thought for us, say a prayer for us. I mean, just think about the migrants, put themselves in their shoes, try to walk in their shoes. In fact, at this time of year, one of the things that's been very popular, and people from all over the country have come to what they call the Migrant Trail Walk. And
Oh,
No More Deaths supplied a meal for the last night of the walk. But that usually started in Sasa Bay, Sonora, Mexico, all the way to Tucson. And for 1 week, people would get to walk in the shoes of migrants, so to speak. But that's been canceled this year because of COVID. But next year,
sure.
it'll likely happen again.
Sure. Oh, that's great. Oh, I appreciate it, Jim. This is really good information, and that's a nice broad description
Yeah.
of No More Deaths. NoMoreDeaths.org is a place people could go to get more information if they want to get engaged, find out how they could get engaged. That's great. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, the other thing I would add, Bill, if you can allow
Yeah,
one more thought,
of
the other
course.
thing I would add is that we are so fortunate here in Tucson and in Phoenix and this whole region to partner with, I think, amazing border justice groups. Tucson Samaritans, Green Valley Samaritans, Humane Borders, which puts out the water tanks, Kino Border Initiative in Nogales, Derechos Humanos. I mean, there's just incredible groups. Dan Millis does tremendous work with Sierra Club and the wall issue. So I just want to do a little call out to them because, if people are inclined to, want to donate to them, we all work in the same sort of area and we support each other very much. The last thought I would like to share with you is that for people especially who are experiencing retirement, whatever that, I don't use that word a whole lot. When I retired, I pulled a line out of a William Stafford poem, which is still, it's still on a gourd. I imprinted it on a gourd. And it goes like this: somewhere deep where you have no program, your next discovery lies. Somewhere deep where you have no program, your next discovery lies. I found out personally that it took me about 2 or 3 years to let go of all that, what I did for a living and all that stuff. The beauty of retirement, if you are, able to do so without having to work gainfully, is that you can choose to do, almost anything you want. And I think as an elder, I would just say that one of the things that's clear to me is giving back. And how do the Buddhists like to say, do no harm, benefit others if you can. That's what I think it's all about. And certainly have fun, do the things that you enjoy in life. But I think a great deal of the volunteer opportunities.
Yeah,
so thank you very much, Bill,
for
your questions.
That's great. I know. I appreciate you adding that. Those are really good points there. Well, thank you very much for your time, Jim.
You're welcome, Bill.
Take care and stay safe.
You too.
All right. Thank you for listening to AIO Financial. This has been brought to you by AIO Financial. If you need help with any part of your finances, please contact AIO Financial for a free meeting, aiofinancial.com. We do have a free ebook. We have an Expat ebook. We also have an investment ebook. The investment ebook can be found at aiofinancial.com/invest ebook. We have several free ebooks. We appreciate any comments, questions you have for us. If you have any comments, please comment where you find this, the video, the podcast, the blog. And if you appreciate these interviews, please subscribe, please leave a rating, please leave a comment. It makes it easier for others to find these. All right, take care, stay well, bye.